Alright, YouTube is up.
YouTube's up, is it?
Yep.
Very good, very good.
Alright, well, let's go ahead and get started once you're ready with your mic.
Yep. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to get in the right spot. I was fiddling around with it last night and I messed it up.
Okay.
Yeah. Alright. Now sit there, you... Okay. Anyway, welcome everybody to this developer roundtable. Today we have Robert with us.
Hi.
Welcome. Okay, so you said we were going to cover UI. So what's the current dealio, so to speak, on the UI?
Well, we're basically working to just kind of implement all the final remaining aspects of the UI. We finally got to the aspect of doing the main menu and the options earlier this morning, last night. So after this a little weekly update, I'm going to release an update on the Steam development experimental branch that'll basically have one of the last builds we'll be doing for UI. Then we'll probably be like a couple of minor ones like early next week. And then that will kind of help us wrap up part one of 1.3 of trying to basically just kind of get all of that knocked out. And realistically, when it comes down to the UI, there were a lot of like aspects of it that took a lot longer to implement than we would have liked. So I guess I'll start on like the most complicated aspects and then just kind of go from there and just kind of give like a drive by of like what we were thinking in terms of adding in some of these elements to kind of help people play the game and kind of help further reduce player frustration in terms of like why are all these guns have the same numbers in terms of damage and etc. So one of the first things that we kind of like knew we needed to kind of put in when we pushed the UI was a proper Kanban like chart, like a graph, like in Division, that kind of shows like damage over time instead of just the pure damage that we were normalizing. We were basically taking the entire damage graph and we were normalizing it to one value, and that was not representative of how effective a gun could be in some situations. Like you take into consideration the 50 caliber sniper rifle or the SCAR or the M4. You know, some of the lower class weapons had very severe damage drop offs. They were lower calibers, so you couldn't really look at that and see on face value, oh, this is really good at this range. But then the moment I'm X distance away from a unit, the effectiveness of this gun is going to lower. It's not just going to be the spread that I have to worry about, but it's also going to be the damage fall off. So that was something that we wanted to really kind of push and get in here, so that way people had all the information they needed to make meaningful tactical choices in terms of, these systems have been in the game for the better part of like 6 months, and it was really hard for people to just kind of understand like when were these guns going to excel. We feel like with the new like graph based system that we added in earlier this week, and we'll see some improvements in a patch that are released today, that it will solidify it and make it very useful for the long term in terms of planning out how you're going to arm your units and specialize them, especially when it comes down to the operators and just how they're going to affect gameplay as we get into like the mid part of 1.3. One of the other aspects we looked at was how to declutter the UI, because as it stands, it's very busy. There's a lot of elements going at all times of the day. So we tried to work with the UI artists, and that was a lot of back and forth over the last couple weeks to figure out like, okay, people are saying this online, we have our own perception of it. Where can we meet in the middle? And that took quite a bit of time because we were like, okay, getting revisions, getting drafts no one even saw, because we were just like, let's experiment with this, let's try moving this over here. So you'll notice that there's like two elements that are still question mark in my mind that we're going to be solidifying on Monday, Tuesday, and it's the unit details panel and where the mission objectives go. I'm not really comfortable on where those were placed, and those are like one of the last two elements, and I'm kind of drawing a line in the sand earlier next week, and it's like couple of the holdouts that I'm going to be pushing for to solidify. Oh, that and the log message, where that pops up from, for like the news feeds. Because like in the last bill, it's kind of disjointed. There's like an aspect of it on the top right and an aspect on the top left, and it all just needs to be consolidated under one location. And that was like a miscommunication with our concept artist. So it's a matter of basically just solving that and then pushing forward in terms of basically like getting it solidified. Because we basically have redone the entire UI. We redid the barracks, we redid civilian management, we redid the system for evacuating units out of a helicopter, like the rappel UIs. Um, I think the only UI I actually did not get improved was the victory window, where you kill Chelsea, and that's also like on our back of our bucket list because it's just a quick little facelift. So I gotta have someone really quickly probably whip up something for that. It was really low priority in terms of everything else we had to get designed and implemented. Because one thing that you don't realize, or rather we didn't realize, is the complexity of taking a mock-up from a PSD, Photoshop, Illustrator draw-up, and then translating that into the game engine. Is that it's not a one-to-one conversion. You have to literally like recreate all the alignments and the borders and the layers and everything hand by hand. Like there's no automated system for converting it over, and then a lot of elements are single use, so you have to like you get these exports, these aspects of the images exported, and then you skim them, and then and then it makes everything else unbalanced, and then you have to spend hours just reorganizing it, and then making sure the UI isn't expensive, because historically in the past our UI has been pretty expensive because of we needed to use more validation and more basically turning off elements of the UI when things aren't updating. We don't redraw certain graphics every frame because then that was causing a lot of like FPS drops and hits on the CPU. So that was another thing is as we went in and we skimmed these elements, we had to make sure that we weren't creating even more problems by adding new elements that weren't properly to like the workflows we had established previously in terms of maintaining like a optimization and whatnot, which you would think wouldn't be an issue for a UI, but UI is up there in terms of one of the most expensive things for the game. Um, in terms of there's a lot to draw from the mini map to everything else. Um,
I didn't think it would be that expensive.
yeah, the Unreal Engine handles UI very uniquely. You figure like our slate is what they call it. Profile is incredibly high on the CPU. The GPU is nothing. We've give you an example of another game, the Batman games. They don't use UI for every element. They will use GPU visualizations and particle effects for part of their UI and fake it to make it look like it's 2D. So like if you find like old GDC documentation um, from the Batman games, those games' UI were so expensive that they had to use like workarounds and cheats to basically get it cheaper, but still accomplish the visual fidelity they were going for. And it was more of like those like 3D visualizations they had on the 2D HUD, like when you're like playing as Batman. And some of the stuff in the world I think also was particle effects instead of having a traditional, you know, 2D UI. So those are kind of the tricks that you have to employ to basically kind of like hit the same visual fidelity level you want to hit, but still maintain a good frame rate. And that's the thing we struggle with in terms of basically making sure that everything's firing on all calibers. So that was a concern. That's something we're going to be making sure and evaluating and profiling as well in the first couple of days of next week, just to make sure nothing kind of sprouts up out of nowhere. But as far as I know, everything's working just fine, at least from the builds that I've played and the feedback that I've received from the experimental. Um, Another element that we were basically keen on was for civilian evacuation is that we added the graphics, we added in the little like three panners in terms of like you have your main window, your secondary window for choosing like your civilian rules, and your third window for like picking out of the list if you want to like change the order of operation. So we reskinned all that. Um, Let me think. What else did we work on for UI? The mini map will be one of the things that we work on early this week to completely close up basically 1.3 part 1, which is basically just going to be getting rid of like icons and going more in the Red Dragon approach or StarCraft approach, where things are generally more of like color blobs. They're smaller, like they're microscopic. So if you have a concentration of units and then Chelsea has a concentration of units coming, it's easy to look at the map and know, oh, they're coming. Like it's not gonna be like a salt icon or like the only icons we're gonna keep on the map are gonna be the socks, and those are gonna be made somewhat transparent. We're gonna be experimenting with that. So like that's why like the last, very very last elements we've been saving is just to kind of make that mini map useful, because it's kind of been relegated to just like it's just kind of there, and it was really really hard to know where you're under attack from, because just how visually busy that mini map can get in just in a moment, just over the course of like 20 to 30 minutes. I mean, you guys have all played the game, as you can see that like there's a lot of icons on that map, and a lot of those icons need to go because generally people will remember where they place their units. They know where they put them. Um, and from there, if you've lost like your assault squad or your marine, whatever squad, you can use your groups. You can, click around, look around your compounds. But to have that level of fidelity of icons was an idea that was originally created in our inception when we released on early access. Because originally we only had like 8 to 12 guys, and the map was like a quarter of what it was, and there were no vehicles, and it was more like a Star Trek type of game where you sent out away teams to basically capture zones, and you had to fight off the infected. And essentially, as that scale got larger and larger, that's like an antiquated idea, an old approach to doing it. Whereas like once we scaled up, once we got larger, once the community kind of pushed for like this is what we want to kind of go in, from a collaborative effort with working with people to kind of make the game better, that was like a system that just kind of got left by the wayside. So this is our way of just kind of like improving that system and making it more human readable and just giving you guys more actionable intel. And then around the doctrines wheel, you'll notice that we took most of the ROE options and the other stuff like that and we put it on a ring around the doctrines wheel. So now, like your ROE, your diplomacy, everything is around that little doctrines wheel. So it's very easy to access everything. You don't have to kind of look around on the whole GUI to find the most commonly used options. The DNA research will join that wheel in a couple weeks. We have the UI designed. It's just a matter of getting a couple of last minute icons updated, excuse me, and then getting we have to make a couple of changes to how things unlock, and then we have to also change the progression for how lieutenants come out, because now getting shredder rounds will be contingent on hunting down and killing each lieutenant in their own unique province or zone that they protect. So you'll have to kill each one, dismantle Chelsea's organization, infected group, whatever, and then from there eventually go and push to kill Chelsea herself. So we're kind of preparing for that, slowly but surely, kind of pacing ourselves to kind of make that change, and then have an experimental just for that. But as it stands, we're just basically working on just kind of solidifying and kind of getting those elements designed behind the scenes. So then that way there's no surprises of like, oh, we're still waiting for this graphic or whatever. Um, and then I guess I'll talk about the aircraft carrier as
Yep.
well. So the aircraft carrier, um, since it was important to me, I know it's not absolutely realistic, but it was important to me that the aircraft carrier would be very easy to offload and load units on the docks without having to have a crane or a lift or any of those other trivial things. Because it's cool for the second and third time, and then after that you want to blow your brains out for how long it takes just to move like 4 of your vehicles or 6 of your vehicles onto the carrier. So the idea was is we kind of modified the base body of the assault carrier and made it to where the crane could also move units between the lowest loading dock, and it can also offload them onto docks themselves by like there'll be a button where you can basically press it and it will scan if there's a flat surface where the elevator door The lift could basically make contact and allow vehicles to drive off or infantry to drive off. So theoretically, we kind of pushed in that direction to make it more gamey and to just kind of accommodate, like, oh, if you see a dock, you can use that, and you can kind of shift infantry and vehicles on and off the dock. Or you can beach the aircraft carrier onto an actual beach. It'll take a while to dislodge it, but it's the quickest way of like launching an like like a invasion on an island. So let's say for instance you go over to Angel Island and you turtle for like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. Then load up your aircraft carrier with like strikers, Black Hawks, uh, infantry, separate them between the upper decks and the lower decks based off of whatever their job is. They'll shoot from the carrier. Your aircraft carrier has weapons, so it'll defend itself. Bring it into like a beach, and you can beach it, and then the front doors will drop down, and then you can basically just kind of lead like a full-on, um, you know, invasion on like whatever beach is suitable. There's only gonna be certain beaches that we're gonna allow the aircraft carrier to basically disembark at, and then realistically, this is where it really shines when we introduce San Francisco North because of all the docks that are there. And then you can land at Half Moon Bay. You can land at not Half Moon Bay. So you can land at God, what's that point on the northern tip by the wharf? Because those areas have a lot of docks. But then there's also the area on the left. There's that little cup. I can't think of it right now, but like there's a bunch of areas by the Presidio area that you'll be able to land when you have the aircraft carrier and everything else, by like breaching it and then basically just landing invasion forces from Treasure, from Angel, or maybe you base your central base on San Francisco and you somehow trap Chelsea on Treasure Island, which will be incredibly hard in the early game, but it's possible. Um, but you figure those are things that we're looking at to kind of like enrich the gameplay and just kind of add more versatility and then take away the whole thing of if Winters dies, you lose, it'll be the aircraft carrier. So they'll attack the aircraft carrier and try to do kamikaze runs on it pretty frequently. So you want to make sure you don't leave it in areas where it can just be, well, just nuked. Literally just they just come by and just crash into it or something because you're just leaving it
Land
on
on
like
an
the
infected beach.
essentially, if it's not protected or your attack fails and gets like pull out or something. Um, Beyond that, it was pretty much a matter of we redid the main menu as well last night. We kind of made it closer to the concepts we've been showing. We did the options, the video, the audio, the gameplay options, or we retooled those or revisualized those. We added a section on the main menu for last played. So the very last game we were playing will show up on the first page on the main menu now. So you can essentially just like jump into the last game without having to get a new game and load. Um, we rethemed and kind of resized some of the elements on the main menu. There's going to be some oddities in terms of basically their sizing for this build. Again, it's experimental. We're just kind of getting out what we can in terms of the HUD. The HUD's the focus. You'll see some solidification of the main menu on Monday. Um, we added so that the music player finally supports saving and loading. We added a whole new graphic to the music player, so that way you shouldn't have to, and if this is a bug, please report it. But in our test, whenever we loaded workshop music or normal music, we saved the game and reloaded it, the music would automatically resume playing when you loaded your save file. So essentially, that was kind of like the one of the things that we wanted to push and kind of get in there. We redid the airstrike icons because a lot of people didn't understand like what the icons meant from our first pass, so we just kind of cleaned those up. Um, let's see, what else did we hit upon? And then we redid the command bar at the bottom right. So that would be it in a nutshell of kind of everything we've done for the UI. Um, are there any questions you have, Derivar? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I've got two here from the YouTube chat.
Okay.
Um, so I thought these were actually quite good to ask. Is Armchair General asks, isn't that what an amphibious carrier does, which is the landing and taking off from the beaches thing?
Normally it has a
And
little transport boats. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that, but we didn't want to go that realistic. Typically, they have those little like infantry, like those. It's like those modern transports. That it's not like the World War II versions, but it's like I forget the name. There's like an acronym or like a special name. Where traditionally the amphibious carriers would have like a sub unit or like an LTV that would come out like in Battlefield, and then that's what actually lands. But we opted for more of the direct route to kind of cut out units that, like, again, the carrier is what we're comfortable with for testing for aquatic. The carrier is going to be a test to see how far we can push the engine in terms of buoyancy and water simulation. And then from there, if it feels right, then we might revisit it in the future for more aquatic vehicles. But for right now, since the release, the only thing we want to just kind of do is do the carrier, push that, and kind of cut that corner of realism for the sake of gameplay is just have it to where the carrier can just land and beach itself. And it'll just be, again, it takes a while to dislodge it from the beach because you're not supposed to do that in real life. Anyhow, there, Margo.
Yep. Um, and I just realized the other one that's not a question, it's actually a request. And that is to remove the build limits.
For, I'm assuming that's the guard towers.
Oh, I can only assume, yeah.
Yeah, we can't remove those limits because I think I answer the question almost every week. But
Yeah.
we're not removing those limits. If we remove those limits, then the game turns into World War One, and then the AI can never actually pace to your level because then you build a World War One trench line, World War Two trench line, and then they never break through again because they have to increase their numbers, which they have a build limit, and if they go over that build limit, then the game explodes in terms of performance. We used to have no limits, and then, well, everyone complained about bad performance. And then we looked
Yeah.
at the save files, and we would see like 100 turrets. Like, this was before guard towers. We'd have like 100 turrets, 200 turrets, and then they would have like fencing and walling and all that stuff, and that was fine. But the turrets have a cost. The guard towers have a cost, and then that's multiplied by what the infected have to use to counter you to kill you. So it was just
Like,
kind of like, eh.
I remember when I first came in and was talking to you. I remember sending you a screenshot of quite literally just a line stretching from one beach to the other of just turrets,
I know.
and you kind of like you wanted to throw me out of a window.
But it was more so it's the balance implications. Is that if we allow unlimited turrets, it's over. Like, you win, GG, it's over. Like, there's no way unless we nerf those turrets into the ground to where they're ineffective against like units. But then people are gonna want to build even more turrets, and then the infected are gonna need even larger numbers to do anything meaningful. So it's like I hear what you're saying. I don't have a long-term solution for that just yet. I want to see how our AI changes go over on the game because it's very possible that once myself and Derek sit down and we focus on the AI for the game in the later stages of 1.3, that we decide even like it's impossible to play the game without doubling it, tripling the amount of turrets. Because we have made performance improvements, but we're saving that performance for other mechanics and other systems. And that's the other thing we also take into consideration, is that if we up the turret count, that affects other systems and the budgets that have been allocated to them. So it's like we're waiting to see just kind of how the cookie crumbles, how all the systems come into play when they communicate, and then based off of that, make the change if we have to. In terms of like, oh, like these systems are, yeah, like we need to up this. We improve their intelligence, they flank more, they have better utilization of their numbers, which means that it's only fair that we give the players more turrets to play with, more guard towers to play with. We're adding in 2 more defensive placements in the next couple weeks. An Avenger stationary target for dedicated anti-air with a large radius. It will be a counter towards when we push the factions in 1.4 for their air, and it will be a counter for the birds. And then we're adding in a medium Atlas guard tower that will allow you to station a crew of about, I think it was like 4 to 6 is what we're experimenting with right now. You'll be able to change out the individual weapons of the entire crew that mans that medium guard tower, and that'll be like a tower you can pack up and move. So as you're like have these areas where you don't have the resources to build guard towers, it's not secure enough for your engineers to come in and not get sniped. You can guard these medium Atlas towers, get them into position, set them up, and they'll give you a temporary mobile tower. Or you can just leave it there if that's how you want to play. It purely comes down to your play style. It's giving these little tools of just at least that's one extra thing that will help in kind of helping cement your position. Because then you don't have guard towers take a while to build, they're expensive. But if you just want to move these around the bridges or key locations or where you have evacuation sites going on, you can do that. Then once the evacuation site is closed down, because maybe civilians are no longer coming to that point, maybe it's too far away from a front, and you want to evacuate quicker, you can pick up those mobile guard towers, move them to the front, demolish your evacuation center in the back lines, move it up a couple grids. So that those like that will kind of give you some more tactical options at least to play with. Um, but I guess Dervar, is there anything else you could think of from like a question standpoint of anything else you think we should cover based off of anything else that I've talked about or discussed? That's what I was more so saying. Those questions work
Yeah.
too.
Um, I don't really have any of my own.
Okay.
Um, Someone here did ask about the carrier. If you'd like to answer that.
What was the question?
Would the carrier do what the boats do in Kingdoms and Castles and just hug the shore until it got to its location?
Hug the shore. No. It's gonna be a fully movable aircraft carrier. So you can move it anywhere you want, like in the water. Like, so if you want to move it right next to your base that you built next to the coast, you could do that. It'll provide protection, but it'll make it more vulnerable for like a juggernaut throwing a rock at it per se. So those kind of things will be things you have to think about in terms of like maybe you should leave your aircraft carrier out to sea because then it's like like it's just easier to protect. Um, Tom, if you have a question, write it in text because in this format, whenever I change to bring people on to talk on voice, it breaks the YouTube overlay. So for the end of the month ones, we're gonna end up changing it to like a different layout. I haven't figured out how that's gonna look yet. So if you have a question, Tom, just write it in text. We'll take some questions because we missed the end of the month one anyway. Remember?
Yeah,
Well, this is technically the end of the month one. So
technically, without everyone
technically,
else.
yeah.
Everyone else
So
didn't get an invitation.
here we have some more questions. What else have we got? Hit me with these hard questions.
Hard ones, all right. Some minor improvement. Are some minor improvements coming to the open world borders, map edge? Since we will move the carrier around. Right now, the fog of war does some strange stuff. If you send a sparrow to the edge, the fake world terrain can be entered.
Oh, he's talking about the end of the map, isn't he?
Yeah.
Oh, why would you fly over there? Okay, so
That's what I was looking at. I was like, why would you
okay,
fly there?
so
It doesn't make sense.
in my mind, that's like a icing on the cake polish system. Like there will be some improvements when we add San Francisco North because the map's gonna get larger. But like we're not gonna have that. We're not gonna dedicate that many resources into stopping players from flying off the edge of the map at this time because it's gonna take away resources from the gameplay and everything else. Don't get me wrong. We're going to have to, and we're going to have to clean up that so people can't get off the map. But if you're flying like 5 minutes off the edge of the map intentionally just to see what happens, I mean, it's kind of on the player at that point. I mean, it is early access. Again, we're going to get to that, but that's like a low priority. Um, when it comes to the carrier, obviously we'll have it to where it can only go where there's water. That thing will have safeguards in mind. But if we're talking about like aircraft and you're trying to bug it out of the map, I mean, it is what it is for right now until we can get to that point later down the road before we leave early access. Because As it stands right now, I'm going to kind of hit upon what I posted in the announcements a couple days ago. Just open it up on my phone. Bear with me. Let's see here. Announcements. So, right now, we are in phase one of 1.3, and that's basically finishing up the mini map early next Monday. Minimap revive, expand the minimap. So that'll be Monday, Tuesday. Now, if everything goes well and there's no critiques, revisions, anything anyone brings out of the left field that it needs more work, then we're moving on to phase two by the middle of next week. So that'll be the Avenger turret, that'll be the Medium Atlas tower, and then we'll be working on building placement and making it less finicky and adding tools and working with the community to figure out like what do people want that technically we can't do. Some people have mentioned like a grid-based grid snap system. Because the game wasn't built to a grid-based system, that's something we're gonna have to look at and see if it's gonna work. Because you figure we have no idea. It's been like something that we have like on our wish list or something like that. But again, we have to look at that. That's gonna be one of the things that we're gonna be listening to and attentive to going into next week. So because as it stands, minimap that should only take us a day or two. Maybe 3 days and something comes out of left field and slaps us like a fish. And then at that point, by Wednesday, Thursday, we should have the Avenger and the stationary guard tower. And so by Friday, I would argue by Thursday, Friday, we should have like the first two elements of Phase Two in. And then I'm not gonna say if we're going really really good, then we'll start the building and the placement stuff. So what I would say is plan on the following Monday to basically have an experimental just about building placement, adding in structural components, and making it to where like you could build on the marshlands. Because historically, you haven't been able to build on land that's uneven. We're going to be looking at what everyone has to say in terms of building. We're like the lights, like the lamps, the street lights, removing those. You know, figuring out how to make it work so that if you want to build on a sidewalk and halfway on a sidewalk, what can we do technically? So those are all things that we'll be looking at, and that because I'm going to estimate that we're going to be on building, placing, and structures being finicky for about a week or less. So I'm going to say that not this coming week, but the next week after that, we'll be on the building finicky stuff for about a week. We'll work with the community. We'll have a build almost every day, if not every other day, on experimental. And then it's the aircraft carrier. So then, we're looking at roughly around 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, roughly, um, basically until we're on the aircraft carrier. We're almost done with phase two. So each phase is roughly a month, I guess you can kind of say. So again, like based off of that estimation, we're about 4 months away from starting co-op. 3 to 4 months out from co-op, basically at that point. And we try to keep each phase within a month. But, UI, I kept saying it was going to be done. It was going to be done. And then we literally just kept getting slapped in the face by just...
You mentioned the infamous word, there's going to be a riot.
We did because like you figure it was like okay, then we thought this was good. We put it out, and people in the Discord were like, "I don't like these colors. Like, why? I don't know what these airstrike icons mean. What do I do with this?" And then we're like, "Oh shit, send it back to concept. Let's go work on another element while we wait." So, yeah, legitimately, that's kind of been it, and it's fine. That's what we want. We don't mind people. We want people to say stuff now, then rather than say it later down the road, 6 months down the road, 3 months down the road, and we're done with the UI. Like, where were you before? So you figure, it's good though. That's fine. That's what I wanted to hear. So like, you figure if people come out of the woodwork and they kind of delay it a little bit, that's fine. Like, because then you figure yes, we have to adjust our times labels and our roadmap, but it comes to the territory of just kind of like, it kind of has to work for people that are going to be playing the game to some degree, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. What else have we got, Derivar, for questions?
All right, we got Um, there's actually been quite a few. Uh, would it be possible to make deployable mobile variants of current buildings, like, say, a tractor trailer that deploys a decontamination trailer which detects infected like the tower, or perhaps a mobile barracks that has half the capacity but can be used for a mobile base, taking inspiration from the radio truck old capture truck?
So, at
That's
this
not good.
time, so for the DNA research tree, we want to squeeze in a research truck for the Atlas. We want to have it to where you take it in the yellow and red zones, you deploy it, and then now it sends off a message to the horde because it's harvesting DNA. So then that way it takes out more of the trivial elements of just running around, collecting every DNA that's on the floor, and some people just don't want to do that. And I understand that. So I want to give people different ways of playing the game. Getting back into the fight if they've gotten destroyed recently and they need to catch up on their research. And they have a really good military arm, or they're just really good at units and just CC or crowd controlling. So I at the moment that's kind of our next test is to kind of see how that goes and kind of balance that because you figure again it's just gonna be like a little like hazmat scientific wing on the Atlas. You go over there, you deploy. It takes a couple seconds to deploy. It takes a couple seconds to undeploy. You want to have a team guarding it. If you want to really, really be cheap, you could have a Chinook standing by or landing on one of the rooftops. So then that way, the moment it's done, you just evac it out, and you evac your defense teams out immediately. So like that kind of stuff is like what we're going to allow for people that are going to want to be creative and be like, oh, like why would I drive this back to base? I can just Chinook it out. And then the interesting part is that vehicle is going to store the DNA that you have until you bring it back to a medical facility. So if that vehicle is destroyed, then you lose what you harvested in that zone. It's not going to be an instant deposit. It's going to be like, okay, I have it stored in this vehicle. Now I need to get it back to base. And now the infected know I'm here. They're going to hunt me. They're going to try and kill me. And if you're inside the lieutenant's area, they might take interest in you. If you're by Chelsea, she's definitely going to probably take interest in you, depending on how close you are. Because that's one thing we'll be tweaking going into their AI is making Chelsea not as aggressive, to where she doesn't cause as many early game failure states. Um, it's more on her lieutenants to do the work. Now, mind you, if you just push her and constantly annoy her, she's gonna slap you around because the game
He's
is
gonna fake
basically
booty.
Jesus Christ. Because at all intents and purposes, this is reverse cat and mouse. She's the cat, you're the mouse, until you turn the tables on her by getting the shredder rounds. And then obviously I'll mention this now because I keep seeing people having memes about it. They have to trap Chelsea in a cage and then just leave her in there because her AI will bug out. We're gonna fix that. You're not gonna like how we fix that. She's gonna go on a killing spree if you have her in a cage when we release that update. So good luck. Because that's something we're going to be doing is again looking at all their AI and making lieutenants properly function and work, making sure the Chelsea knows what she needs to do in some situations, when to retreat, when to attack, giving her abilities, like that kind of stuff. So it's going to be very interesting because that's going to be towards the end of phase three, where we do the infected AI and the AI update as a general, where we're going to revise the Juggernaut AI, the Leviathan AI, and we're going to tune up a couple of systems to spitters. Um, we will allocate some time. Let's see if we can get it working because I had a prototype working back in the day for the spitters to climb buildings. We need to see if it's fixed so it works on a larger map. Whenever we used it on smaller maps, like the horn maps or whatever, and they would work. Whenever we used it on the open world, they'd break. So we need to see if they fixed that in Unreal Engine 5 or in a recent update and they just didn't put it in the patch notes of the engine. Or maybe it was and it was just kind of hidden somewhere. We think it was a memory problem, which is generally when the maps get too large for the navigation, it just causes that issue. We're not sure. It's not really documented anywhere. Because we're the only ones kind of using the engine in this crazy fashion of having such a large open world. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, for an RTS game more so, where everything's loaded at the same time. So again, that's something we're gonna be looking into and experimenting with, and see if we can return back to that point of getting it to where we can get them to climb. So that will be part of the AI changes, is seeing if we can roll that out to the larger maps and not just have it in our test scenarios. You can find random gifs of it in our announcement channel, or if you search for like climbing, you'll find people posting the gifs that I posted previously. I mean, they were pretty robust. They'd literally just jump onto a wall, run up it, and then if your units were on top of it, they'd just start murdering them. Like, it was great. Because then that's the biggest thing for me, is making it to where there's no safe space for the Cirque. On the water, on the buildings, on top of cars. Is getting it
It's
to the,
great.
yeah, getting it to the point where, like, again, like, the infected can find you, they will hunt you down, they can kill you no matter where you are. And it's about getting the game to that point and just kind of like, getting that solidified. Because if we can get it working for the infected fully in the open world, then we'll roll out a version of it for the Cirque that allows them to rappel up and down buildings without having a helicopter. So that way, if you have a couple units on a building, you can just tell them to go down. They'll let you know that, hey, look, this is going to require me to rappel. And then you'll see a little icon like in Total War where like it shows they're going to climb down, and they just do it. And that's something that's been really important to me to kind of figure out technically. And again, we've got it working in smaller builds, but once you roll it up to that larger one, it just kind of breaks every time. And it's something we haven't been able to figure out. But we're going to dedicate a couple resources to it when we work on AI. And then at that point, if it's still not feasible, we'll put it on the back burner. When we get a little bit bigger, hopefully we can reach out to Epic and be like, hey, this isn't working. How do we get it working on this map? And maybe they'll take a look at it. Because it's something we have like a wish list almost growing of like features of the engine that when we have enough, like, big enough, we can actually go to our engine manufacturer and be like, hey, how do we do these things? And do it in a way that's not going to blow up the engine. Because not everything is documented to the best of the engine's very vast. So it's like some of the things you got to learn on YouTube. You got to learn by reading cryptic broken tutorials on the internet. So that's something we want to push towards as the team gets larger, as we get bigger, as we get more like push, is to kind of build those connections so that way we can understand the engine better and utilize it better based off of limitations. Um, Let me think. Any other questions, Devar?
Yeah, an absolute load of them.
Oh no! Hit me with it.
Yeah, we got a lot of them. A whole
Okay.
lot of questions, not a whole lot of time.
Okay. Well, hit me with them.
Um, just arrived, but will there be an event on the aircraft carrier, like if you evacuated some infected civs? Will you have event where the carrier is getting overrun and you can deploy troops to prevent that?
You'll have to have troops manually there. So the aircraft carrier is not going to be automated outside of the guns that are on its deck. And those guns will have an arc where they're allowed to fire. So if people are on your deck, you're going to have people on the deck to shoot them, is the general idea. Um, yeah, that's generally the idea we're going for. And for them to get on your deck, you would have had your aircraft carrier beached somewhere. You're because we're not going to have the whale transport unit for quite a bit of time. So, like, it's gonna be like the birds attack it. It's gonna be like the juggernaut throws a rock at it. It's gonna be, you bring it inland to where basically like the standard infected can actually melee it. You have to put it in a position of vulnerability. Um, and again, it's gonna be pretty interesting because people can turn off the birds. They can't turn off the juggernaut. It's gonna make it, and they can turn off Greg, Mr. Wormy. It's going to make it very interesting because then it's going to be, for some people, the game will be too easy. So they'll have to reconsider turning those on or just making the game in a no lose state. Because you figure, just keep in mind of that, there's only so many things the infected can use to attack a carrier. Um,
Wait, you took off the option to turn off the juggernaut?
I thought you could. Am I mistaken? Can you turn
No,
off the
you can't.
juggernaut?
Yeah, you can turn off the juggernaut.
Oh, sorry. I'm like,
You
okay,
can turn
never
off both.
mind.
I was like, "Well, hang on, I haven't been
Well,
told this. What
it's
the
the
hell?"
birds, it's the juggernaut, and then it's the Leviathan you can turn off. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Slow moment. So, yeah, when if you
had
turn
that
those
drink a
off,
day.
then it's like, okay, I guess you just don't want the difficulty because you can't lose at that point. Um, and one thing we might look at, I know we talked about it on and off in discussions, is we might, with the buoyancy introduced in the water, we might go back to seeing if we can make the standard infected jump off into the water and swim. I don't know if that's going to be a thing that we play around with.
Imagine
Um,
watching an infected tread water.
well, the idea is that they would basically have attrition where most of them would drown. So the further they go, the more most of them, well, some of them will drown and die. So it'd be like a total war climbing a wall for balance reasons, and then only your units can basically have a lot more versatility because they just kind of eat that shit up. Because the idea is that Cirque is basically X, like oh god, Delta Force and the Navy and all the like like the elite of the elite. So they've been trained for all that.
I think SCP,
Sure.
EMCS.
I've never actually followed SCP too closely. I know it's a sin.
Disappointing.
I know it's a sin. But you figure it's one of those things where it's like that might be something we have to look into long term as well. Because by giving people those options of having it to where like they can turn off all of that, the aircraft carrier is just like GG, you win if you turn those off. So yeah, we know that the engine supports AI water swimming as far as I know because other games have done it in the past. For the person asking about other ships, right now our goal is to roll out the ship, and that's the only ship we're adding at this time, just to see how it works, how is the performance, how well can we do water simulation, and then based off of that, it'll set the precedent for everything else. So the aircraft carriers are a technical test bed. If it's horrible and the performance tanks, and if we do a bunch of workarounds and the engine doesn't really work too well for the scope, then it'll be the only aquatic unit we ever add. But if it works and it's performant, or maybe we know that there are pipeline improvements coming down the line from Epic to make these things be easier to work with or cheaper, then we'll consider adding more stuff in the future. But it also comes down to whatever we add for Cirque, we have to add the equivalent for the sub factions to hurt, kill, and for the major factions to hurt and kill. So we have to kind of keep our scope under control because if we add a Navy Coast Guard ship to Cirque, well, what are Federal going to do? How are the infected going to encounter that? So that it balloons the game design, the cost, leaving early access. So it's one of those things where we have to kind of take into consideration every implication of adding something. So that's another thing we're looking at because our goal is to leave early access by late 2020, 2024, early 2025. And that will be with the conclusion of the pandemic. That will be with a couple more horde maps added. That'll be with the campaign. That'll be with the factions. And that'll be with the co-op. And then in everything we add, we'll obviously push that back, make adjustments, X, Y, and Z. So those are all things we're looking at just to make sure that we're staying as closely as possible to a trajectory we've laid out for ourselves to leave early access. Um, what else have we got, Derivar? A couple more questions.
Um, I've got one here, but I'm not sure if it's a joke question or a serious one.
Oh no.
Because on the YouTube side of things, someone has asked, will there ever be an option to talk to the zombies and convince them to give up?
No. Next question.
Come, infected individual, come, we've got cookies! Give up,
No.
please!
It's a Zerg. They're gonna fight you to the death. The first StarCraft, not the second StarCraft, where Kerrigan was in charge.
I was, no, Kerrigan's in charge in a second.
Yeah, but they had a temporary alliance with Jim Raynor's crew.
Yeah, because no one likes Minsk. Oh,
No
Minsk.
one likes Minsk. Minsk hate crew.
I like Minsk, fuck off. He's cool.
Yeah. What else we
Just
got?
start talking about fucking StarCraft.
I know. I love
Um,
StarCraft.
I love StarCraft. I gotta play it more.
I never
Um,
played Legacy of the Void.
you have you played? Okay, we're getting off. We're getting
I played
really
I
off
played
topic.
Heart of the Swarm. I played Wings of Liberty, but when it got to Legacy of the Void, for some reason I was already kind of out of it. To where I was playing Company Heroes and Company Heroes only. To where like that sci-fi fad, I was just Company Heroes 1 and 2 all day.
I mean,
So
Coming Heroes
GG.
is a great game.
Yeah, I know, but like by the time it came
Three,
around, I was just like it was too late for like how long Blizzard spaced out the releases.
yeah,
It was sad. And then I
three
don't
kind
like the
of
Protoss
crushed the
that
legacy.
much. Like I like the story, but I never really liked the Protoss. I like the Zerg, I like the Terrans, but the Protoss were just never that fun to me. So it was just kind of like I think that also put a bad taste in my mouth. Cause I just was like, I don't know if I could do this. I did it for StarCraft One. I played all three campaigns, but then I was just like, I play them on the multiplayer. I got to like silver or whatever, and I was just like, I can't do it. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I play
yeah.
a lot of the co-op on StarCraft too. I play a lot
Co-op
of
on
co-op with my
StarCraft is
friends.
fun. I love that.
I
Yeah, I
I love it.
me and Duravar used to play it, one of the programmers, and then the writer and I used to play it for reference. And then we've also been playing Stellaris' co-op for reference as well. So like you ever see me in Stellaris, and then Duravar, actually you and I were playing it too.
Yeah, you and I were playing Stellaris not too long ago.
Yeah, we were playing it for the co-op reference, running one nation where I was doing one aspect, he was doing another aspect of the same group, and we were just playing it for reference. Like I was just like, Duravar, I need to play this for like research for co-op because I don't know what they did. Maybe they came up with a better idea than we did. Maybe it's the exact same idea we have, whatever. But I need to play it. So we ended up just making a nation and just playing that for what 12 hours. We haven't
Yeah, we
finished it
did.
yet.
Yeah, about 12 hours. Yeah, we still haven't finished. I've added a shitload of total conversion mods, so we're gonna play it again with the total conversion mods on because they're fun.
I know, but the mod is like a bottomless pit. But yeah, so basically, it's been like we've been playing that a lot recently. We need to play it again. We haven't played it in a couple weeks, but
Oh yeah,
I was able to get a good enough taste, and oddly enough, what Solaris is doing for their co-op is basically what we're doing for our co-op, with some changes here and there. But it was actually really cool because I was like, oh, like this is basically what we're planning on doing. So it's nice to see it. Everyone shares the resources and everything else. It was actually really cool. Um, but yeah, I digress. Back to you, Dermar.
we've gone so far off topic.
Yeah, but it's talking about RTS games, and RTS games
Yeah,
are
I mean,
fun.
yeah, exactly. RTS
Yeah,
games are fun.
yeah. What else we got?
Like StarCraft is good. Um,
I need to play the
shit, hang on.
campaign again. So while you come up with the question, I'm gonna play the entire first two games campaigns again before we start our campaign. Shut the fuck up. I gotta play it because we're basing like the bridge, like the Hyperion bridge. That's gonna be Alcatraz, but you're gonna be able to
Yeah.
walk around in third person, either as your operator or Winters. We're still debating, we're still arguing about it internally. Well, we want to make it like the Avengers hub, which is why you saw the whole team playing Avengers a couple months ago when it was free. Is we want to make it to where when you start the campaign, you're Winters or you're operator, we're thinking Winters, and you walk around, you have an office, you do mission recruitment, you like staff a team, kind of like XCOM, but it's StarCraft, where it's like that's your home, that's your base, you have divisions. Or like, what was the game that you were showing me recently? Starship Troopers? No, Aliens.
No. Yeah, Alien. Um, Alien.
The Alien game. I know you're talking about. You were playing it
Alien Dark
recently.
Descent.
That one, where
Alien Dark
basically
Descent. Yeah.
we wanted to do that for the campaign. We wanted to make it to where you have to. It's not just moving between divisions. Like via a button, you have to go to each division, talk to people, build those divisions up, recruit people. We wanted to take aspects of XCOM, combine it with Wings of Liberty, and then push that into the campaign because we didn't want the campaign to be exactly like Pandemic, where it's just an open world, just a bunch of things are going on. We wanted to have like a map of San Francisco, like a tactical map, and then you build up circuit this infrastructure. You do the upgrades. Those upgrades benefit you on these missions that come up on the tactical map. Some of them are randomly generated to kind of farm for money, XP, DNA, and then some of them will be preset launch missions, and then you get in a ship or a plane, and then you launch into the mission. So like it's funny. That's why I was saying I gotta go back and I gotta replay StarCraft. I'm probably gonna have to buy that Aliens game for research, and then get with my writer slash game design doc guy, and then we're gonna basically just we're actually gonna like towards like December and January is when we're gonna look at all the expanded lore, all the novels, all like the pandemic stuff we've done, and we're gonna repackage it and update it based off of like all the game design changes that have occurred, and then just basically update the gameplay script because we have our gameplay script from the campaign is like old, so that's gonna be the time that him and I go and play some more games. We update it based off all the mechanics and systems and how we want to factor them in to the campaign, come up with all the missions, dynamic ones, the big epic like set piece ones, and then basically figure out like what you're gonna do on Alcatraz, what you can upgrade, like the final stuff, because we want to have it to where like Dragon Age Inquisition, where it's kind of like that is your base, you manage it, you operate it. Like Wu might handle the scientific side, but military, you're in charge when it comes down to it for like operating it, running the day-to-day stuff. Um,
Never played Dragon Age. Never played it
what?
again.
You never played
I never
Inquisition?
played. No, never played it.
Oh, it was like a game where they had you build up this castle, and then nothing ever happened. It was really
Oh, so it's very
disappointing.
linear.
Yeah, but I like the idea of it, where it was like XCOM, where you build up the ship and then it comes under attack every once in a while. But having the attack, well, okay, I'm gonna stop talking. But anyway, back to Durbar. I gotta stop
That's
talking.
off topic.
So I'm starting to read
Um,
spoilers.
yeah. Can't give spoilers. No.
Only you and I can talk about that in a closed room for NDA if you want to know, because you're already under
Hey,
NDA for the story stuff. But anyway,
exactly.
okay. So here's another question. Let's wrap it up.
Okay. Let me find a good one. There's so many really good ones that I'm seeing.
Hard
Like
one.
people
Give
have
me
been
a,
asking some really, really good ones. Let me try and find one for you.
okay.
World building.
Anyone playing that
Yeah,
Starfield? It's amazing.
shut up! I haven't. I want to play it. I want to experience it on my own.
Oh my god, it's so good. I'm gonna play it after this. After I get my animals dog food. Well, I have to get my dog food and my cat food after
Nah, come
this.
play StarCraft with me.
I'm gonna play Starfield.
Fuck you.
I just started a mining
Uh,
colony.
okay.
Go. What's the question?
I'm definitely gonna grab it. I'll have to grab it on a console though because
It's
it's
phenomenal.
fucking way,
Oh, it
way.
will. My computer can barely run it at 80 frames with
Yeah,
FSR 2.0 on, so you're gonna have to buy it on console. Like, I guarantee it. That game is like the chunky
my
boy.
my shit'll blow up. It'll scream at me for like 10 seconds and then just detonate like a C4
Because I have a
explosive.
3080, I have an i9, I have like 64 gigs of RAM. It's all in a solid state, and I'm getting 80 frames. So it's like GG. But anyway, do the
I mean, yeah.
questions.
Okay. Getting so distracted.
I know.
We're like one of those hyperactive dogs. Um, I heard you mention before that you can only climb world that they can only climb world buildings. Will they be able? Will they not be able to climb player-made fences would make electric fences a must.
So, there was an idea back in the day that the spinners would be the only ones that climb fences, and then electric fences would cancel them out. It would basically like stop them. We kind of regained or went back on that because we weren't sure how frustrating that would be. Because we already get enough feedback about how the infected are spreading in their zones and they don't know how. So we were like, that would almost be a frustration mechanic. It would make sense. I mean, so it's one of those things where, like, if there's a building that they can climb when we introduce that mechanic that will leapfrog them over your fence because you built to the side of the wall, the building, and they can just run down the wall and jump down the wall and they get into your perimeter, that's okay. But for the time being, we're gonna leave it out for anyone to just climb your fences and get in. Because I feel like that's not gonna go over too well, and it's gonna be, because then that's going to, it's gonna bring to the forefront the idea of a lack of defense towers, a lack of guard towers, and a lack of population. Because now you're gonna need much more people to exert security over a province, over a zone. So it's like at that point, we're like putting salt on people's wounds. So I want to leave that aspect of design out at this time and make it to where they have to break through. They have to bring a juggernaut. If you had bad design, they go around. Or if you have bad design, they'll use a building to circumvent your walls if your walls don't enclose the building. You know, so like that's the furthest I want to go at this point. What else you got, Derivar? Maybe do two
Yep.
more.
Two more. Okie dokie. Um, as I was scrolling up, I saw a really good one. And I lost it. It was brilliant. Those questions are so far.
Ooh, excuse me.
Bugger
If
it,
you
I have
hear
to
a
move on to a
cat
different
and
one.
a dog howling in the background, it's because they're fighting each other. So like I swear to God, I'm not abusing them. It's just literally like the dog will look at the cat to the dog, and they just start jumping and fighting, and running around the apartment. They're like more hyperactive today than normal.
In regards to factions, will we be getting the ability to give them orders if their allies say have them patrol a zone and report infected or guard an area with a squad, or escort civilians to evacuation zones as this will we be able to delegate units to AI and give those simple orders like guard a position, hunt infected in a zone, etc.
Ooh, okay, I like him. So basically, that's come up multiple times. That's on my wish list. I think that at this point, I'm saving that for 1.4. I'm saving that for Pierce and Natalie, because you figure the framework that we've established for the dynamic civilian groups is going to need to be it's going to be expanded. It has to be expanded because they're too trivial, they're too basic. They get across the idea of warring tribes, militias, collecting resources, but when we get to we finish co-op and then we use the resources because by releasing co-op, the sales will increase. We'll get more people on board. We'll use that to basically reinvest it into the factions, reinvest it into the later aspects of gameplay. So one of the things that I'm keen on doing in 1.4 is the factions, Pierce and Natalie, redoing them from the ground up, giving them vehicles, seeing what offshoot vehicles we can give to dynamic civilian groups, helicopters, ground vehicles, and then at the same time giving them more purpose in gameplay, like a reason to ally with them. Because right now it just gives you more unit diversity. It gives you a lower pop cannon fodder militia unit. But what I want to do is I want to make it to where basically you can issue them orders of follow me, defend this location. You know, they might call you up and give you a mission of like, hey, if you defend this location for a certain period of time because we're having difficulty, it'll give you 200 rep. So those are things that we want to look at for Pierce, for Natalie, for the groups, and that's come up in the past, and that's basically something that I want to save for 1.4. Um, some of it might be pushed to 1.5 for world events. We might break that rule depending on just how long we can be in 1.4, because 1.4 is kind of like mostly a question mark. If you look on the roadmap, there's only like 4 or 5 items on it, but that list is growing quickly in terms of the things that we're gonna need to put in there. And once we get halfway through 1.3, is when you're gonna see 1.4 fill in more, based off of what the engine's releasing for the next versions, like the procedural asset generation. Because we got a question in Discord the other day about when do we ever plan on going back to infected buildings, infected growths in the world. And that's something that we're just waiting until the tech is there. We're waiting until the engine can handle it in terms of basically when we put it in previously. So we're always looking at all those aspects and then basically balancing it versus we're only like 5 people. It's 2 programmers. And realistically, sometimes it's just one programmer because I have to do management and God knows all the other stuff that goes in the game design, like judging and approving stuff, finances, all the other fun stuff. So most of the time, it's also just one programmer. So that's why sometimes things might take longer, they might take shorter. Um, we try and do our best, and we try and basically make sure that something's always coming out every week. And if it's not, we try and make sure that people are in the loop and then they know what's going on, why things are taking longer. Which is why sometimes, like, if we don't post an update, I'll just start doing random pings on the weekends or random pings during the weekdays of just things that we're working on. That are wow, it's taking longer. I mean, just to give you an example, that aircraft carrier took us a month. Each vehicle, like the Abrams, will probably take us about 2 weeks or so, because each one modeler is assigned to a vehicle. So like that was another reason why we pushed off factions, because there's so many vehicles that we have to push into the game, and then there's the doctrine stuff we have to do because we have to go in and we got to revise. We're adding weapon packages to the helicopters. We're adding the Abrams. We're adding the VTOL. We're adding a Bradley. Each one's gonna approximately take about 2 weeks to a month to put in. So those are all things that we're like, okay, like where can we kind of cut corners and kind of like make sure the quality is still there. So that's something that we're looking at to basically like make sure we're able to stay on the roadmap, get everything situated with the small team size that we do have. Uh, so yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. But just know that we factions and that management stuff isn't on our radar, and I'm earmarking it for 1.4, and then some minor things on 1.5 if like the mission stuff. Cause I'm trying to break up and put all the mission stuff in there, but I might end up merging it. Like you figure at the end of the day, that's why the roadmap says that things are like can be moved around and shifted at any given time. And if I make the argument that 1.5 is now the co-op and I want to wrap up the rest of the pandemic in 1.4, that's just what's happening. And then we'll just do it all sooner, and then we'll break up the campaign into parts on 1.5 and just do it, and then just update you guys in terms of like, okay, this is going to be a quiet period of like 6 months, 3 months, but theoretically, from all the content we've released and from having co-op, you guys will be happy to just kind of let us go on our own little corner and just develop to get the campaign. Because during that time, there'll probably be almost no like community requests allowed at that time because we're going to be all in on the campaign. It's going to be just no one's really working on pandemic because it's going to take every available resource we have to do the mission system, to do the mission scripting, to do like the character modeling, to do the cutscenes. Like it's gonna the unique locations. There's gonna be interior zones, exterior zones. There's gonna be areas that you played in pandemic mode that are completely cleaned up and cut out just for the campaign. So it's gonna be that kind of approach that we do. So it's gonna be interesting. So one more, Durvar, and let's wrap it up.
Okay. Someone asks, I would like for the CERT commander to have lieutenants that you can give orders in specific zones. One can focus on building an evac site to take the pressure off while you focus on building an offensive.
So you're talking about automation. You're talking about basically what Stellaris does, where you could give it like a mission directive for like what do you call that? A planet, and then it will like focus on some types of resource gathering or whatever automatically. Is that what he's asking for?
I assume so.
Oof.
I can only assume.
I don't. Uh,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a tough one.
it's come up. We've talked about it in the past. It's the first stepping stone to making it to where you can play against the Cirque. So regardless, we'd have to do it eventually to make it to where the Cirque understand how to gather resources and how to basically manage and build their own bases. But at this time, I'm going to argue that's outside the scope of what we have planned. I mean, don't get me wrong though, that would be nice to have that level of automation. So that way you can focus on more things. You can just take ownership of a zone and then just say, hey, AI, work within these resources, work with this money, and do your job and build this while I work on the war effort. I think that when we introduce co op, that will buy you some comfort in knowing that you and your team, your friends, can work towards a common goal. But I would argue that that's not going to be coming down the pipe until we figure out what we're doing with the verses in terms of like you playing as Infected or playing as Fenrir, because those are on wish list items. We have to figure out when we're gonna do that. It might be after the campaign that we basically push like a you play as the Infected, and then that will be the first test because then we would have to roll out an AI for Cirque anyway, and that AI that understands how to build and fight and play would be the stepping stone for what you're asking for. Because then it would just be a divisional or a localized AI instead of a global one. That's basically like what the infected do. I'm not gonna say no, but I'm not gonna say yes anytime soon at this time. I'm gonna say it's in the middle. But that's a really good idea. It's on my list. So, as we get closer to playing as the infected, you're welcome to bring it up again. Um, but yeah, not yet. We'll get there. Um, any other really spicy ones there, Var, or you want to wrap it there?
Uh, none that I can see that are really spicy, like really long and drawn out ones.
Okay. No hard ones?
Uh, Not that I can see. I am still scrolling up though.
Okay. Well,
I'm kind of reading them one at a time, sort of thing, seeing if we've already covered these sort of subjects.
in the past,
Yeah.
well, some of them, keep in mind, they don't come to every single one. We can't expect them to listen to every single one. So if there's a good question that you think I should mention again, just for the sake of everyone's on the same page, you're welcome to say that one.
Oh, no, those are the ones I'm looking for.
Okay. So, um, a reminder, there's going to be an update that goes live when I skedaddle to go get my animal food at the pet store. It'll go live once I end the broadcast. The patch notes will be up when I get back. For the people that are here, it's just more UI, new options for the main menu, new pause, new video, new audio, basically a new new window polishing, more bug fixes to the UIs you already had. Nothing gameplay wise. So just keep in mind of that. When I get back, I'll put up the Steam post and write it. Um, just kind of stalling for Derivar here to find a good question.
Okay, so this person Jericho asks, did you cover the potential? Did you cover the potential option for UI scaling so users can change their UI size? The icons can be quite cluttering and large. The groups for units can overlap icons at times too.
So that's been a very tricky subject for us on the team. We've tried to look at other RTS games and noticed that they weren't doing that. So we were like, maybe we just need to do better on our DPI scaling settings and better pre-arrangement on safe margins and how things clip and how things look. In my mind, if we can do it and do it to a good degree in terms of like you don't have to worry about customizing the UI because it just works, then that's one less thing that you have to worry about. So I've pushed away from the sliders and tried to basically have us understand and learn the tools that are available to us a little bit better, so that way we don't have that overlapping. But if we are still getting that overlapping, I would encourage you to share those photos in support boards on Discord. We'll look at them and we'll come up with solutions to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. There were some examples that we thought we had fixed completely as of like the last update we're about to release today, and some other ones that basically were over the week. But again, if you're getting clipping, you're getting overlapping, let us know and we'll resolve it and basically add in more safe regions. Um, but we're trying to avoid having an interface editor where you have to scale and manage everything and just where it just works. Like when you play Company Heroes, or you play Broken Arrow, or you play Total War, everything's just scaled. Everything has a place, and it's not just a technical nightmare. An overloading technical nightmare for people that are just novices that just want to jump into the game and play it and don't want all those caveats. So that's the biggest thing that I'm thinking of in terms of basically like the end user is how do we do a better job to make it to where you don't have to pick up where we left off, or it's like things are just done improperly because it's scale or placement or overflow. So that's why I would encourage you guys to share those things with us so we can fix them. Um, and you brought up a very good point. I'm gonna put that on our list of another thing to triple check on Monday, regardless, because we checked it last night. But we're gonna look at it again just to make sure, regardless if you guys don't post any pictures, because I want to make sure we didn't miss anything. And we've skinned and moved around and rearranged everything. So I just want to make sure the UI is where it needs to be. But yeah, is that good, Durvar?
I think that's good.
Excellent. So I guess give the close up.
Excellent. All right. Well then, thank you everyone for coming along and sharing your questions and going in and listening to us. If you'd like to continue and further support Cepheus Protocol, we do have a Patreon and a merchandise store that we'd greatly appreciate. We also have, what do you call them, Robert?
Support packs.
Packs, bundles,
Yeah,
supporter packs,
if you
whatever
want
they're
to help
called.
support develop it, and you don't want to do the Patreon crap, or you just don't want to buy merch, consider picking up one of the support packs on the Steam store. It helps, and because
Yeah.
you get like a skin for the vehicles.
Yes, so every little thing helps.
And they're on sale right now. The whole game's on sale. All the DLCs for the support packs are on sale for like 10 to 20% off. I think for the next to the RTS strategy sale ends I think on Monday. So you guys have till like Monday at 10 a.m. to basically pick it up if you're interested for a friend or just for yourself. Um, thank you guys for coming, and we'll be here again next week to just kind of pick it up, update you guys on how things are going. And at that point, I'm going to argue that we're going to be on the steps of starting to address the finicky building placement and just like ironing out the building as a whole, so we can move on to the next parts of stage two. Ready?